Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre.
Ancora Maria,
ora pro nobis.
So coming into religious life, sometimes it's good to have reflections on religious life, because we sometimes can forget how important our choice has been. And it can get to the point where we can start looking out into the world and seeing things that we miss or that would fulfill us or that's better. The grass is always greener, right? So I want to give a little reflection. It's not so much me, but it's so wonderfully put in these spiritual exercises. They're quotes from St. Bonaventure, just one quote after another. There's a few sprinkled quotes in there from Bernardine of Siena, St. Anthony, things like that. But and I'll maybe do a little commentary here and there. But this is, it's just gem after gem. So, I wanted to look at the readings from today too. So from the epistle, I think it applies to us very well when we look at St. Paul's. Now, of course, they're trying to apply it here because we're starting into our more penitential season and things. But know you not that they that run the race all run indeed, but one receiveth the prize? So run that you may obtain. And every one that striveth for the mastery refineth himself from all things. And they indeed, that they may receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible one. I therefore so run, not as at any uncertainty, so I fight. Not as one beating the air, but I chastise my body and bring it into subjection, lest perhaps when I have purchased, or since I have preached to others, I myself should become a castaway. I think it ends right there. No. For I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all in Moses were baptized, and the cloud and the sea, and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual food and drink, etc., etc. What pertains to us is when we look at the first part, fighting and running and striving for that particular crown that's incorruptible. The comparison here, obviously, is the difference between being in the world and not being in the world. Whether that's what St. Paul's, the example that he's given or not, we can easily make that here. Out in the world, everyone fights for a crown that is corruptible because they function under the reality of their senses being immediately engaged in whatever they're doing to obtain whatever they need at that moment. Even if they're striving in a holy way, it's almost, as we'll see in the conference, it's almost impossible to arrive at the incorruptible crown when you're immersed in the corruptible. You live it, you touch it, you breathe it, you smell it. You're completely immersed in the corruptible, striving for the incorruptible. So St. Bonaventure says, first of all, here's said, ponder from what you've been freed from, and whereto you are led by your religious vocation, is the heading of this little section. So we want to focus on what we've been freed from. And if we really think about it, we know what we've been freed from. But when the difficulties and the the monotony, as it were, of religious life set hold, or the dark cloud that comes over us, which is all part of the purification. And the temptations lay hold of, the disagreements between different people or misunderstandings, all the demonic thought plotting that happens here and there, kind of putting up with the imperfections in our brothers. When all these kind of things happen, we can easily look to a different place, to be somewhere else, to be doing something else, to be with others. Somewhere else it'll be better than right here. But what have we been freed from? What has religious life led us to? And so first of all, regard whence God has called you. For he has taken you from a world full of miseries, replete with the snares of the devil, which often draw souls to eternal damnation. Now, if you talk like this nowadays, people go nuts. It's wrong to talk about the world being evil, it not having, it's full of goodness and this and that. It is all those things if you forget the fact that most of the things you're engaged in are sinful. It's just that most people's intellects and their conscience has been so darkened by contact with the foulness of the earth that they no longer see anything wrong with it. People that do perverted things are attracted to perverted things. The more perverted you get, the more tainted you get by the world and its perversions, the more attractive those things become. It's that example that I give, like when we talk to the kids. People always want to ask, why can't you sin in heaven? And I'm sure I've given it to you. Why can't people sin in heaven? Does that mean that angels and the saints aren't free? No, the angels and the saints are perfectly free. But they can see the difference between taking a swim in a cesspool with floating human waste and getting into a crystal clear swimming pool. It's a very simple example, but this is essentially our fallen, delicate human nature here on earth is so attracted to what we'll keep seeing, the threefold concupiscence is what we call it in spiritual theology. That threefold concupiscence weakens us to such a state that when we come to a choice, we often pick the wrong thing. And we become more and more tainted by picking that thing because it brings us some kind of pleasure, at least we think it's pleasure, until we get to the point where swimming in the cesspool actually is quite enjoyable. And we don't understand why people are saying that's not a good thing to do. So how dare they say that it's perfectly fine. Look at it. It's liquid like every other liquid. It's, brown's a good color. Why are you saying brown's not a good color? The stench is bad? What are you saying the stench is bad? I like the stench. Who are you to say? And the list goes on and on and on. This is what we apply to the world. Now, the difference between the world and the cosmos is all the things created that are good. The world is that thing that has to do with the world, the flesh, the devil, the created things, the things that have become corrupted or corruptible. It's the evil of the world. We're not saying that the world doesn't have goodness in it. It has goodness in it. But because of our fallen human state, we tend to pervert the goodness, replacing it for God. Here's a beautiful example that St. Bonaventure gives. So he's giving an example of why he has taken us from the world full of miseries. So why can we refer to the world? As the world is a foul, an unclean place, with filthy pitfalls, and as a ditch full of dead men's bones, to attract worldly dogs. Could you inhale? So what is basically, he's giving you a picture, if this is what the world is. Because we see sin, we see the pitfalls, we see the difficulties. He's saying, if this is what it is, or as it is this thing, this foul, unclean place, attracting worldly dogs, could you inhale pure air from such a foul pit? Would it be good for either a sick man or one wishing to retain his health to either lie or remain there? Who would want to make his abode in such surroundings? Such a place is the very world around us. So it's a strong saying for us today. And he continues, and so God, who wanted to save your soul, said quietly to you, this is from Canticles 8, flee, my beloved. And then St. Bonaventure continues, flee this dunghill, which is the world of sin. And that's why it's a dunghill. It's a dunghill because of the concupiscence has become distorted after the fall of man. We're weakened in our ability to use good things. And so it becomes for us a dunghill. Also because it's passing, and this isn't what we want. Those who find pleasure in this life become attached to this life, and they don't want to go to heaven. I was just talking to a lady yesterday who's coming into the faith, and she's telling me how her sister said to her, I don't know why you want to get baptized. It's not worth anything. Like basically she's just saying there's no God. And she asked, well, how do I respond to that? Just ask her. I said, just ask her, what if you're wrong? That should resolve the whole thing right there. What if you're wrong? But why does someone say there's no God, you don't need to be baptized, all that? Because I can continue to do what I want to do. But let's see, are those people really happy? Are you really happy when you weigh 400 pounds and you're 400 pounds overweight because you get to eat all the McDonald's you want to? Are you really happy for that? Are you really happy that you watch perverted things on television to the point where you can't think about a pure thing anymore? Are you really happy about that? You know they're not. They're sitting in a room, a dark room, watching something they shouldn't be watching, doing things they shouldn't be doing, and hoping that nobody will walk in and find them doing that. And they live a life to lie so that nobody knows that they do that thing. Right? What's so great about doing that? You're hiding everything. Flee, my beloved, flee this dunghill, which is the world. God called you from a world full of snares, the snares of the devil. He gives an example here about how hazardous the world is and all of the number of pitfalls that we can have. And he refers to St. Anthony of the Desert. St. Anthony of the Desert had a vision of all the difficulties out in the world. He beheld it from his own place. He saw the world was completely full of just snares to draw souls down into heaven. Like St. Paul says, that we're striving for a crown. All those snares are just to grab you and keep you from getting that crown. And you see, this is what venial sins are. Venial sins are those little snares. One snare after another snare. They're not grave, it's not grave, it's not grave, until you're so attached to those things, you do something that's grave. Now you're in mortal sin, and you're attached. And once you're attached, you start to even pervert yourself so that you can revel in those perversions. We tend to think, well, if you commit a mortal sin, you can just go to confession. What happens usually by the time you start getting the mortal sins, you're starting to get so weakened in the whole thing that you become attached to making those mortal sins. And so you cast off that thing. This is what happened with Luther. He just cast off the whole faith. He retained what he could and cast off the rest so that he could have what he wanted. St. Bernardine says, in the world man cannot escape the sinful allurements, the suggestive conversations, nor the evil inducement of custom. In the world, therefore, he must fall. That's a rough statement. In the world, if you were to say that to most people, they'd say, you can't say that. You can't say that he must fall. But St. John does say that if anyone says they're not a sinner, they're a liar. In the world, he must fall. For this reason, the prophet says, let their way become dark and slippery. That's from Psalms. That's from Psalm 34. Let their way become dark and slippery. This is scary. For those who stay out in the world that aren't supposed to be out there, this is against them. Let their way become dark and slippery. I gave you a way, which would be religious life. I gave you a way to get there, and you don't want it. Let their way become dark and slippery. And let the angel of the Lord pursue them. It's Psalm 34:7. So therefore, being in the world, it puts our whole life, the life and the health of our soul, in jeopardy. And St. Bonaventure says it's impossible for a man to be in the middle of the sea without endangering his life. Regardless of the good condition of the boat, so too, living in the world, you are upon a most treacherous sea. And so much the more you are in danger by reason of the fragile nature of the boat, which is your poor body supporting you. Now, the folly of being young is that we find ourselves strong. We think we're strong. Not only that, but nowadays, youth they're made to think they're actually really smart. They're told they're smart. They're told that they have these great talents. They're going to change the world. So they start to believe actually that adults don't have anything to offer them. They have everything to offer adults. This is the great folly of our own day. And it's been that way for the last, I don't know how many generations. So we start to think that boat that he's referring to here, we are in the middle of a sea. And I've even received this from young men discerning. That these young men discerning, that they say to me, I actually had somebody actually say to me, that it would be too easy to go into religious life. In religious life, it's too safe there. I feel like I'm cheating by going into religious life, because there in religious life, I'll be removed from all these dangers. Isn't it better that I stay out here in the world? That's absolute folly. It's the Titanic going across the ocean and saying, nothing can stop this boat. All it took was one iceberg, and that whole boat sank. And how many people died? They still make movies about it today. The Titanic was indestructible. This is what we think about ourselves today. We think that our boat is indestructible. We're told from our earliest youth we're indestructible. We believe from our folly and the temptations of the devil that we're completely indestructible. Our boat can exist anywhere. My choice for religious life, simply my choice. My life in the world, simply my choice. No matter what, I'm going to heaven because God's a teddy bear. Right? So it's that delusion. So that the frailty of that boat, what he talks about, that frailty of the boat, which is our body, it's because of our fallen concupiscence. The thing is, we can have a good thing there, and we're so attracted to the good thing that already you get a hole in the boat, and water starts coming in. Because now we're attracted to something we shouldn't be attracted to. And sometimes you can be attracted, like at St. Charles' Etsy, there's this girl, he had to walk down the street, and there was this girl who lived in a certain house, and she was extremely unattractive. He had no attraction to her whatsoever, and next thing you know, there's a hole in the boat, and there's attraction to her. It was a temptation. But the temptation was so powerful that he started thinking he was committing mortal sins by the thoughts he was having about this woman that he wasn't even attracted to. So now that's somebody he's not even attracted to and has no interest in. What about somebody that you are attracted to and you might be interested in? What then? That's the iceberg. You hit it and the boat sinks. You think you're strong until the one thing comes your way and then you're not strong anymore. That's why King David refers to, they prepared a snare for my feet and they bowed down my soul. These are the things we come in contact with throughout the... St. John the Evangelist, in his first letter, he says, the whole world is in the power of the evil one. So if St. John says that, why can't we say that the world's not... I mean, we can't just say the world's full of all kinds of goodness. It's all butterflies and lilies, and everywhere we go, everything's going to be fine. The whole world is in the power of the evil one. And his whole job is to bring us down into hell so that he can offend God. This means that the world is burning with the fire of concupiscence. The devil deceives an unhappy man by this delusion, for by temporal and worldly goods they seduce the flesh, and through the flesh, eventually, they becloud the mind. For it is the three evils. The evil of the world consists in this: pride, lust, and avarice. Those are the threefold concupiscence. Pride, lust, and avarice. So it's concupiscence of the flesh is the lust. Concupiscence of the eyes is avarice. And then the pride of life is pride. The first holds sway over the mind, pride. The second over the body, lust. And the third over temporal goods, avarice. St. John testifies that all that is in the world is the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. So you see how they'll condemn us for saying these things, but it's the apostles who talk about this. It's the evangelist who writes this. That's 1 John 2:15. Beautiful quote to reflect on. All that is in the world is the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. St. Bonaventure continues, truly, there is nothing more harmful in the world than these three things: the concupiscence of the flesh and of the eyes and the pride of life. By these three, the devil captivates sinful souls. So through this triple concupiscence, the world flourishes. It's a beautiful thing to think about. The prosperity, you could say, of the world, the flourishing of the world comes from pride, lust, and avarice. That's why he's referring to it as a ditch full of dead man's bones that has the worldlings come back to it. Now the worldly dogs that keep coming back to that pit, that's the media. That's the media putting out all the rapacity, the foul things of the world. And then everyone becomes so inundated, so inebriated by the smell of rotting flesh that that's what they want. And this is where these first quotes come from. He's trying to help us see that we have to realize it's in our humility, it's in our wisdom to be able to recognize the frailty of that boat. And if I have that kind of frailty of my simple human nature, can I really exist in such an environment that's so foul and still stay healthy? And this is what religious life offers to us. Many uselesses from 1 Timothy 6:9. Many useless and harmful cravings drag man unto eternal perdition. That's something to reflect on today. Many useless and harmful cravings drag man into eternal perdition. Think about the phone. Just think about the phone. Not only is it a craving, they can't stop looking at the thing. I mean, they look at it every couple of seconds just to see if there's a new text message, if it's dinged or something for some other thing, if somebody's on some other social whatever it is, to see what the news is, to check the weather, to whatever. They're always playing with it. They're always touching it. And it's useless. You'd say, no, it's not useless. It shows me where the grocery store is. It tells me when it's going to rain. I talk to my friends on it. I'm able to communicate with people. I need it for work. I listen to holy talks all day long in whatever else. But in the meantime, they hardly ever turn their heart to God. How dangerous then is the world? In the same way as a bird held by a wing, even though it be able to move, it cannot fly. So too the unhappy man captivated by the love of the world cannot be lifted up to divine things. And that's where when you get Hulu, I don't know what that is, these platforms for watching all the movies, all the bad movies, and Netflix and whatever else they put on there. That's basically like holding the wing of the spiritual man. They can no longer elevate themselves to divine things. They're so inundated by heavy, worldly, useless information that their soul can no longer penetrate through to the divine. And so Canticle says, "Flee away, my beloved, and be like the roe, and to the young heart upon the mountain of aromatic spices." Now here he talks about, so God places you and leads you into a direct and safe way of entering upon eternal life. That is religious life. That's why he's called you to religious life, to flee away. The mountain of aromatic spice is the good works of religious life. So God has chosen for us a special dwelling place. And here he makes a beautiful analogy of the mystical mountain. It's a transfiguration. Because in the transfiguration, he takes them to the mountain. And the mountain is a high place. It was a high mountain. By themselves, and was transfigured before them. The high mountain signifies eminence or superiority of the religious over the lowlands of worldly ways, of the worldly ways of life. And you can see that. Think of the dignity that a man or a woman enters into in religious life. The dignity that their bodies no longer used for foul things. Their eyes no longer gaze on foul things. They no longer speak about foul things. The life is a simple life, prayer and work, and being in an environment that's pure, that's centered around the worship and love of God. You live a whole life that way, separated from the foulness of the earth, the wretched conversation, the meaningless, superficial joking that constantly happens out there. Because you can't talk with anybody out in the world about serious things because you don't know if you're going to offend them. You cannot say, one of a gentleman I was speaking to yesterday, he went to the grocery store and there was a lady that sold him whatever they were buying. And so he said, "Thank you, ma'am." And the lady got really mad at him because this lady's transitioning right now to be a man. And I guess he should know that. And how dare he not use the word they? I don't know how you say they. Thank you, they. Or I don't know how you use the whatever they're saying. And he just looked at me and he just said, "I don't know what to say. I was taught my whole life this is what being polite means. And now I'm offending people by doing it." As a lady. And it just so happened, just a sign that we wanted to make, it just so happened when I was talking to them, the quote I had to give was, "Male and female, he created them." We were just right there talking about that. That's controversial. We can't put our sign out because that's controversial to say male and female, he created them. That's nuts. So flee away, O my beloved, and be like the roe, and to the young heart upon the mountain of aromatic spice. Again, the mountain of aromatic spice refers to good works of the religious state. For their life is holy and good. Therefore flee to this place of quiet recollection, namely to the protection of the religious state. And this is why you don't go there just because it's easy. You go there because it helps you arrive at your perfection. God calls us to perfection. He doesn't call us necessarily to say, "I want you to find out the hardest way possible to save yourself and then try to go do that." That's trying to save yourself by picking yourself up by your own bootstraps. We know we can't do anything good without grace. We need grace to do good things. So coming into religious life is a life of grace. Now, many of the things that are out in the world that are good things and you can go do, we give that up. But we know doing good things can also easily land you in sin. For in religion, a man escapes those things which usually lead to falling into hell. There he avoids harmful occasions. Secondly, he flies harmful conversations. Thirdly, he evades harmful customs. Therefore, in religion, grace works wonderfully, so that the worldling who today finds it difficult to avoid sin, tomorrow, upon entrance into religion, scarcely recalls those vices. How beautiful. And this change is due to the grace of the right hand of the Most High. For the right hand of the Lord hath wrought strength. Psalm 117:16. Is that cheating the system? I mean, is that cheating the system to say, out in the world, I have to go to confession for mortal sins? In religious life, I have to go to confession for either venial sins or faults. Sounds like a beautiful thing. God doesn't want us to sin. He wants us to live a life in purity, just like He is. If He tells us to be perfect like He's perfect, and there's a state of life that if you follow it will make you perfect, it seems like the right choice. He's telling me to join religious life. Of course, God isn't asking every person to join religious life. But if it dawns on us, if we're attracted to it, well, He's given us a grace. If you would but grasp the dignity, joy, and value of this religious state, how willingly would you be prompted to cry out with blessed Peter, Lord, it is good for us to be here. St. Bernard expounds on this, explaining the sense of this exclamation of St. Peter says, it is good for us to be here in religious life. For in this holy state man lives more purely, falls more rarely, rises more quickly, proceeds more cautiously, rests more securely, receives grace more frequently, is cleansed more speedily, dies more confidently, and is rewarded more abundantly. I mean, are you sold? You got to live the life anyways. You got to live a life somewhere anyways. Here, let me just repeat it. In the religious state, when he's explaining what St. Peter, Lord, it's good for us to be here. Good because man lives more purely, falls more rarely, rises more quickly, proceeds more cautiously, rests more securely, receives grace more frequently, and is cleansed more speedily, dies more confidently, and is rewarded more abundantly. How happy, therefore, and how secure is the religious way of life. Quoting St. Bonaventure, for the religious state is like a fortified citadel within the church, whose gates are firmly bolted by the three vows, stemming the approach of and preventing the entrance of the devil to tempt and seize the unwary. For against the three concupiscences of pride, lust, and avarice, which are the bases for a sinful and worldly life, we have the safeguard of the three vows. And these three vows of obedience, chastity, and poverty, forming the basis of the spiritual edifice. For us, not only frees us not only from every evil, but from every cause or occasion of sinning which proceeds from these three fonts of sin. So if you think, so the world gives us pride, lust, avarice. That's the foundation of the world. Pride, lust, and avarice. The religious life is obedience, chastity, and poverty. Obedience subdues us to God. Chastity, it allows the flesh to follow reason. And our poverty says the whole world is subdued within our own body through poverty. And this, therefore, it allows us to rest securely, live purely, and die confidently. St. Bonaventure says, any congregation of servants of God who are faithful to their profession can rightly be called a little paradise upon earth. And citing the prophet from the Psalms, behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. This is always applied to religious life. So even if sometimes we don't find that, our reason, our memory can always go back and help us to understand the reality. The reality is, this is a safe haven. And safe havens are good. Nobody in their right mind, going back to the ocean and the boat, nobody in their right mind, like in the time of St. Paul when the nor'easter wind was coming, they looked for Fairhaven. They parked their boat in Fairhaven, right? You're looking for a place where you're going to be safe. No one thinks, well, it's just too safe here in the haven. It's too safe here we just need to venture out into the nor'easter wind and just, we need to trust in God and just venture straight out into that. I mean, that's nonsense. And look what happened to the boat that St. Paul was on. He's just like, I told you guys not to do this. Now you've lost everything. It was only by a gift of God they didn't all die. They should have all died. But they had to, I think 14 days they were fasting. That's not fun. They're being beaten by waves. It's probably really cold. There's all kinds of wind. When they're in a natural environment with no food, oh, that would rack you with pain. All because they didn't want to wait in the Fairhaven, right? So, dearest brothers, this vocation is a very high grace which God bestowed upon you from His infinite goodness. Therefore glorify God your Father, because He it is who recalled you from the world by a hidden grace. Magnify God the Son, who freed you from the servitude of the devil by his pious promptings. Ever bless and thank the Holy Spirit who strengthened you in doing good by His sweet spiritual consolation. This God did in calling you to the religious life, saying from Canticles, flee, my brethren, from the world, and flee upon the mountain of the aromatic spices. That is, to flee to this haven of holy solitude, hasten to the protection of religious life. Amen.